All right, welcome back, Underdogs, Misfits, and Other Little Lunatics. To Stand By Me, we just finished the train part, which was an awesome part in the actual movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch Stand By Me. Let's get into it. About a quarter of a mile along on the Harlow side, the GS and WM tracks plunged directly into the woods. The heavily wooded land sloped down to a marshy area. It was full of mosquitoes almost as big as fighter planes, but it was cool. Blessedly cool. We sat down in the shade to drink our cokes. My eyebrows drive me nuts. Sorry. We sat down in the shade to finish our cokes. Vern and I threw our shirts over our shoulders to keep the bugs off, but Chris and Teddy just sat naked to the waist, looking as cool and collective as two Eskimos in an ice house. We hadn't been there 5 minutes when Vern had to go off into the bushes and take a squat, which led to a good deal of joking and elbowing when he got back. Train scare you much, Vern? No, Vern said. I was gonna squat when we got across. Anyway, I had to take a squat. Vern. Chris and Teddy chorused. Come on, you guys, I did, sincerely. Then you won't mind if we examine the seat of your jockeys for Hershey squirts, will ya? Teddy asked, and Vern laughed, finally understanding that he was getting ribbed. Go screw. Chris turned to me. The train scare you, Gordy? Nope, I said and sipped my Coke. Not much, you sucker. He punched my arm. Sincerely, I wasn't scared at all. Yeah, you wasn't scared. Teddy was looking me over carefully. No, I was fucking petrified. This slew of all of them, even Vern and we laughed long and hard. Then we just lay back, not goofing anymore, just drinking our cokes and being quiet. My body felt warm, exercised, at peace with itself. Nothing in it was working cross-grain to anything else. I was alive and glad to be. Everything seemed to stand out with a special dearness, and although I never could have said that out loud, I didn't think it mattered. Maybe that sense of dearness was something I wanted just for myself. I think I began to understand a little bit that day what makes men become daredevils. I paid $20 to watch Evel Knievel attempt his jump over the Snake River Canyon a couple of years ago. My wife was horrified. She told me that if I'd been born a Roman, I would have been right there in the Colosseum, munching grapes and watching as the lions disemboweled the Christians. Oh my God. She was wrong, although it was hard for me to explain why. And really, I think she thought I was just jiving here. I didn't cough up that 20 to watch the man die on coast to coast closed circuit TV, although I was quite sure that was exactly what was going to happen. I went because of the shadows that were always somehow where behind our eyes, because of what Bruce Springsteen calls the darkness on the edge of town in one of his songs. And at one time or another, I think everyone wants to dare the darkness in spite of the jalopy bodies that some joker of a god gave us human beings, right? No, not in spite of our jalopy bodies, but because of them. Hey, tell that story, Chris said, suddenly sitting up. What story? Oh, this is the Barf Fest. I love it. I asked, although I guess I knew. I always felt uncomfortable when the talk turned to my stories, although all of them seemed to like them, wanting to tell stories, even wanting to write them down. That was just peculiar enough to be sort of cool, like wanting to grow up to be a sewer inspector or Grand Prix mechanic. Richie Jenner, a kid who hung around with us until his family moved to Nebraska in 1959, was the first one to find out that I wanted to be a writer when I grew up, and that I wanted to do that for my full-time job. We were up in my room just fooling around, and he found a bunch of handwritten pages under the comic books in a carton in my closet. "What's this?" Richie asked. "Nothing," I say, and try to grab them back. Richie held the pages up out of reach, and I must admit that I didn't try very hard to get them back. I wanted him to read them, and at the same time, I didn't. An uneasy mix of pride and shyness that has never changed in me very much when someone asks to look. The act of writing itself is done in secret, like masturbation. Oh, I have one friend who has done things like write stories in the display windows of bookshops and department stores, but this is a man who is nearly crazy with courage, the kind of man you like to have with you if you just happen to fall down with a heart attack in a city where no one knew you. For me, it always wants to be sex and always falls short. Okay. It's always that adolescent hand job in the bathroom with the door locked. Richie sat right there on the end of my bed for most of the afternoon reading his way through the stuff I have been doing, most of it influenced by the same sort of comic books as the ones that had given Vern nightmares. And when he was done, Richie looked at me in a strange new way that made me feel very peculiar, as if he had been forced to reappraise my whole personality. and or as if he had been forced to reappraise my whole personality. He said, "You're pretty good at this. Why don't you show these to Chris?" I said, "No. I wanted it to be a secret." And Richie said, "Why? It ain't pussy. You ain't no queer. I mean, it ain't poetry." Still, I made him promise not to tell anybody about my stories. And of course he did, and it turned out most of them liked to read the stuff I wrote, which was mostly about getting burned alive, or some crook coming back from the dead and slaughtering the jury that had condemned him in 12 interesting ways, or a maniac that went crazy and chopped a lot of people into veal cutlets before the hero, Kurt Gannon, cut the subhuman screeching madman to pieces with round after round from his smoking or .45 automatic. In my stories, there was always rounds, never bullets. It was a town in France and during 19 bullets. For a change of pace, there was the Ladirio stories. Ladio was a town in France and during 1942, a grim squad of tired American dog faces were trying to retake it from the Nazis. This was 2 years before I discovered that the Allies didn't land in France until 1944. They went on trying to retake it, fighting their way from street to street through about 40 stories, which I wrote between the ages of 9 and 14. Teddy was absolutely mad for the Ladio stories, and I think I wrote the last dozen or so just for him. By then, I was heartily sick of Ladio and writing things like Mom Dio and Cherez La Bouche and Fermez La Porte. In Ladio, French peasants were were there. Seem too far away. We're always hissing to GI dog faces to Fermez Laporte. But Teddy would launch over the pages, his eyes big, his brow beaded with sweat, his face twisting. There were times when I could almost hear air-cooled Brownings and whistling 88s going off in his skull. The way he clamored for more Ladio stories was both pleasing and frightening. Nowadays, writing is my work, and the pleasure has diminished a little. And more often, that guilty masturbatory pleasure has become associated in my head with the coldly clinical images of artificial insemination. I come according to the rules and regs laid down in my publishing contract. And although no one is ever going to call me the Thomas Wolfe of my generation, I rarely feel like a cheat. I get it off as hard as I can, every fucking time, doing less would in an odd way be like going faggot, or what that meant to us back then. What scares me is how often it hurts these days. But then I was sometimes disgusted by how damned good it felt to write. These days, I sometimes look at this typewriter and wonder when it's going to run out of good words. I don't want that to happen. I guess I can stay cool as long as I don't run out of good words, you know? You know? You know. Okay. What's this story? Vern asked uneasy. It ain't a horror story. It is Gordy. I don't think I want to hear no horror stories. I'm not up for that, man. No, it ain't a horror, Chris said. It's really funny. Gross, but funny. Come on, Gordy. Hammer that fucker to us. Is it about Ladio? Teddy asked. No, it ain't about Ladio, you psycho, Chris said, and Rabbit punched him. It's about the pie eating contest. I love this. Okay, this should be fun to read. Hey, I didn't even write it down yet, I said. Yeah, but tell it. You guys want to hear it? Sure, Teddy said. Boss. Well, it's about this made-up town, Gretna. I call it Gretna, Maine. Gretna, Vern said, grinning. What kind of name is that? There ain't no Gretna in Maine. Shut up, fool, Chris said. He just told ya it was a made-up name, didn't he? Yeah, but Gretna? That sounds pretty stupid. Lots of real towns sound stupid, Chris said. I mean, what about Alfred, Maine? Or Saco, Maine? Or Jerusalem's Lot? Or Castle fucking Rock? There ain't no castle here. Most town names are stupid. You just don't think so because you're used to them, right, Gordy? Sure, I said, but privately I thought Vern was right. Gretna was a pretty stupid name for a town. I just hadn't been able to think of another one. So anyways, they're having their annual Pioneer Days, just like in Castle Rock. Yeah, Pioneer Days, that's a fucking blast, Vern said earnestly. I put my whole family in that jail on wheels they have. Even fucking Billy. I was only 4.5, it was only for half an hour, and it cost me my whole allowance, but it was worth it just to know where that son of a whore was. Will you shut up and let him tell it? Teddy hollered. Vern blinked. Sure, yeah, okay. Go on, Gordy, Chris said. It's not really much. Nah, we don't expect much from a wet end like you, Teddy said, but tell it anyway. I cleared my throat. So anyways, it's Pioneer Days, and on the last night, they have these 3 big events. There's an egg roll for the little kids, and a sack race for kids that are like 8 or 9. And then there's the pie eating contest. And the main guy of the story is this fat kid nobody likes named Davy Hogan. Like Charlie Hogan's brother if he had one, Vern said, and then sank back as Chris rabbit punched him again. This kid, he's our age, but he's fat. He weighs like 180 and he's always getting beat up and ranked out. And all the kids, instead of calling him Davy, they call him Lard Ass Hogan and rank him out wherever they get the chance. They nodded respectfully, showing the proper sympathy for Lard Ass. Although if such a guy ever showed up in Castle Rock, we would all have been out teasing him and ranking him to the dogs and back. So he decides to take revenge because he's like fed up, you know? He's only in the pie eating contest. But that's like the final event during Pioneer Days. And everyone really digs it. The prize is $5. So he wins it and gives a finger to everybody, Teddy said. Boss! No, it's better than that, Chris said. Just shut up and listen. Lard Ass figures to himself, $5, what's that? If anybody remembers anything at all in 2 weeks, it'll just be that fucking pig Hogan out-ate everybody. Well, it figures. Let's go over his house and rank the shit out of him. Only now we'll call him Pie Ass instead of Lard Ass. They nodded some more, agreeing that Davy Hogan was a thinking cat. I began to warm to my own story. But everybody expects him to enter the contest, you know? Even his mom and dad. Hey, they practically got that $5 spent for him already. Yeah, right, Chris said. So he's thinking about it and hating the whole thing because being fat isn't really his fault. See, he's got this weird fucking gland something, and my cousin's like that, Vern says excitedly. Sincerely, she weighs close to 300 pounds. Supposed to be a hypoid gland or something like that. I don't know about her hypoid gland, but what a fucking blimp. No shit. She looks like a fucking Thanksgiving turkey. And this one time... Will you shut the fuck up, Vern? Chris cried violently. For the last time, honest to God. He had finished his Coke and now he turned the hourglass-shaped green bottle upside down and brandished it over Vern's head. Yeah, right, I'm sorry. Go on, Gordy. It's all swell story. I smiled. I didn't really mind Vern's interruptions, but of course, I couldn't tell Chris that. He was the self-appointed guardian of art. So he's turning it over in his mind. You know, the whole week before the contest at school, kids keep coming up to him and saying, hey, Lard Ass, how many pies you gonna eat? You gonna eat 10, 20, fucking 80? And Lard Ass, he says, how should I know? I don't even know what kind they are. And see, there's quite a bit of interest in the contest because the champ is this grown-up whose name is Billy Traynor, I guess. And this guy, Traynor, he ain't even fat. In fact, he's a real string bean. But he can eat pies like a whiz. And the year before he ate 6 pies in 5 minutes. Whole pies? Teddy asked, awestruck. Right you are. And Lard Ass, he's the youngest guy to ever be in the contest. Go Lard Ass, Teddy cried excitedly. Scoff up those fucking pies. Tell him about the other guys in it, Chris said. Okay, besides Lard Ass Hogan and Bill Traynor, there was Calvin Spear, the fattest guy in town. He ran the jewelry store. And Greta Jewels, Vern said, and snickered. Chris gave him a black look. And then there's this guy who's a disc jockey at a radio station up in Lewiston. He ain't exactly fat, but he's sort of chubby. You know? And the last guy was Hubert Greta III, who is the principal of Lard-ass Hogan's school. He was eating against his own principal, Teddy asked. Chris clutched his knee and rocked back and forth joyfully. Ain't that great? Go on, Gordy. I had them now. They were all leaning forward. I felt an intoxicating sense of power. I tossed my empty Coke bottle into the woods and scrunched around a little bit to get comfortable. I remember hearing the chickadee again, off in the woods, farther away now, lifting its monotonous, endless call into the sky. Da-dee, da-dee. That's my bird impersonation. So he gets this idea, I said. The greatest revenge idea a kid has ever had. The big night comes, the end of pioneer days. The pie eating contest comes just before the fireworks. The main street of Greta has been closed off so people can walk around in it. And there's this big platform set up right in the street. There's bunting hanging down and a big crowd in front. There's also a photographer from the paper to get a picture of the winner with the blueberries all over his face. Because it turned out to be blueberry pies that year. Also, I almost forgot to tell you this. They had to eat the pies with their hands, tied behind their backs. So dig it. They come up onto the platform. Water break. Yeah. From the rent. From the Revenge of Lard-ass Hogan by Gordy LaChance, originally published in Cavalier Magazine, March 1975. Used by permission. They came up onto the platform one by one and stood behind a long trestle table covered with a linen cloth. The table was stacked high with pies and stood at the edge of the platform. Above it were looped necklaces of bare 100-watt bulbs, moths and night fillers banging softly against them and hollowing them. Above the platform, bathed in spotlights, was a long sign which read, "The Great Gretna Pie Eat of 1960. To either side of this sign hung battered loudspeakers supplied by Chuck Day of the Great Day Appliance Shop. Bill Travis, the reigning champion, was Chuck's cousin. As each contestant came up, his hands bound behind him and his shirt front open, like Sidney Carton on his way to the guillotine, Mayor Chabernew would announce his name over Chuck's PA system and tie a large white bib around his neck. Calvin Spear received token applause only, in spite of his belly, which was the size of a 20-gallon water barrel. He was considered an underdog, second only to the Hogan Kid, most considered lard-ass, a comer, but too young and inexperienced to do much this year. After Spear, Bob Cormier was introduced. Cormier was a disc jockey who did a popular afternoon program at WLAM in Lewiston. He got a bigger hand, accompanied by a few screams from the teenage girls in the audience. The girls thought he was cute. John Wiggins, principal of Groton Elementary School, followed Cormier. He received a hearty cheer from the older section of the audience and a few scattered boos from the fractious members of the student body. Wiggins managed to beam paternally and frown sternly down on the audience at the same time. Next, Mayor Chabernew introduced Lard-ass, a new participant in the annual Great Gretna Pie Eat, but one we expect great things from in the future. Young Master Davy Hogan. Lardass got a big round of applause as Mayor Charbonneau tied on his bib, and as it was dying away, a rehearsed Greek chorus just beyond the reach of the 100-watt bulbs cried out in wicked unison, "Go get 'em, Lardass!" There were muffled shrieks of laughter, running footsteps, a few shadows that no one could or would identify. Some nervous laughter, some judicial frowns, the largest from Hisner Charbonneau, the most visible figure of authority. Lardass appeared to not even notice the small smile greasing his thick lips and creasing his thick chops did not change as the mayor, still frowning largely, tied his bib around his neck and told him not to pay any attention to fools in the audience, as if the mayor had even the faintest inkling of what monstrous fools Lardass Hogan had suffered and would continue to suffer as he rumbled through life like a Nazi tiger tank. The mayor's breath was warm and smelt of beer. The last contestant to mount the bunting decorated stage drew the loudest and most sustained applause. This was the legendary Bill Travis, 6 feet 5 inches tall, dangling ferocious. Travis was mechanic at the local Amico station down by the rail yard. A likable fella if there ever was one. It was common knowledge around town that there was more involved in the great Gretna pie eat than a mere $5, at least for Bill Travis, that was. There were two reasons for this. First, people always came by the station to congratulate Bill after he won the contest, and most everyone who came to congratulate stayed to get his gas tank filled. And the two garage bays were sometimes booked up for a solid month after the contest. Folks would come in to get a muffler replaced or the wheel bearings greased and would sit in the theater chairs, ragged along one wall. Jerry Malling, who owned the Amco, had salvaged them from the old Gem Theater when it was torn down in 1957, drinking Cokes and Moxies from out of the machine and gassing with Bill about the contest as he changed spark plugs or rolled around on a crawly wheelie under someone's International Harvester pickup looking for holes in the exhaust system. Bill always seemed willing to talk, which was one of the reasons he was so well liked in Gretna. There was some dispute around town as to whether Jerry Melling gave Bill a flat bonus for the extra business, his yearly feet, or yearly eat, if you prefer, bought in, or if he got an out-of-out raise. Whatever may it was, there could be no doubt that Travis did much better than a small-town ranch jockey's. He had a nice-looking 2-story ranch out on the Sabatous Road, and certain snide people referred to it as the house that pies built. That was probably an exaggeration, but Bill had it coming another way, which brings us to the second reason there was more in it for Travis than just $5. The pie eat was a hot wagering event in Gretna. Perhaps most people only came to laugh, but a goodly minority also came to lay their money down. Contestants were observed and discussed by these bettors, or ardently as thoroughbreds, are observed and discussed by racing touts. The wagerers accosted contestants' friends, relatives, even mere acquaintances. They pried out any and all details concerning the contestants' eating habits. There was always a lot of discussion about that year's official pie, apple considered a heavy pie, apricot a light one, although a contestant had to resign himself to a day or two of the trots after drowning 3 or 4 apricot pies. So stupid. That year's official pie, blueberry, was considered a happy medium. Betters, of course, were particularly interested in their man's stomach for blueberry dishes. How did he do on blueberry buckle? Did he favor blueberry jam over strawberry preserves? Had he been known to sprinkle blueberries on his breakfast cereal? Or was he strictly a banana and cream sort of fellow? So they're betting, so they do all this research. Okay. See, in the movie, they don't go into the details about all the underground money being made on these pie eating contests. But anyway, there were other questions of some moment. Was he a fat eater or fast eater, or who slowed down, or slow eater who started to speed up as things got serious, or just a good, steady, all-around trencherman? How many hot dogs could he put away while watching a Babe Ruth league game down at the St. Dome's baseball field? Was he much of a beer drinker? And if so, how many bottles did he usually put away in the course of an evening? Was he a belcher? It was believed that a good belcher was a bit tougher to beat over the long haul. I'm seeing the humor in this. They take this pie eating pretty seriously. All of this and other information was sifted. The odds laid, the bets made. How much money actually changed hands during the week or so following pie night? I have no way of knowing, but if you held a gun to my head and forced me to guess, I put it at close to $1,000. And probably sounds like a pretty paltry figure, but it was a lot of money to be passing around in such a small town 15 years ago, I bet. And because the contest was honest and a strict time limit of 10 minutes was observed, no one objected to a competitor betting on himself, and Bill Travis did so every year. Talk was, as he nodded, smiling to his audience on that summer night in 1960, that he had bet a substantial amount on himself again, and that the best he had been able to do this year, was 1 for 5 odds. If you're not the betting type, let me explain it this way. He'd have to put $250 at risk to win $50. Not a good deal at all, but it was the price of success. And as he stood there, soaking up the applause and smiling easily, he didn't look too worried about it. And the defending champion, Mayor Charbonneau, trumpeted Gretna's own Bill Travis. Whoo, Bill, how many you gonna go through tonight, Bill? You going for 10, Billy boy? I got 2 spot on you, Bill. Don't let me down, boy. Save me one of those pies, Trav. Nodding and smiling with all proper modesty, Bill Travis allowed the mayor to tie his bib around his neck. Then he sat down at the far right end of the table, near the place where Mayor Charbonneau would stand during the contest. From right to left, then the eaters were Bill Travis, David Lardass Hogan, Bob Cormer, Principal John Wiggins, and Calvin Spire, holding down the stool on the far left. Mayor Charbonneau introduced Sylvia Dodge, who was even more of a contest figure than Bill Travis himself. She had been president of the Gretna Ladies Auxiliary for years, beyond telling, since the first Manassas, according to some town wits, and it was she who oversaw the baking of each year's pies, strictly subjecting each to her own rigorous quality control, which included a weigh-in ceremony on Mr. Banchicket's butcher scales down at the Freedom Market. This to make sure that each pie weighed within an ounce of the others. Sylvia smiled regally down at the crowd, her blue hair twinkling under her blue hair. The hot glow of the light bulbs. She made a short speech about how glad she was that so much of the town had turned out to celebrate their hardy pioneer forebears, the people who made the country great. For it was great not only on the grassroots level where Mayor Charbonneau would be leading the local Republicans to the hallowed seats of town government again in November, but on the national level where the team of Nixon and Lodge would take the torch of freedom from our great and beloved general and hold it high for her. Calvin Spear's belly rumbled noisily. Go in. There was laughter and even some applause. Sylvia Dodge, who knew perfectly well that Calvin was both a Democrat and a Catholic, either would have been forgivable alone, but the two combined, never. Managed to blush, smile, and look furious all at the same time. She cleared her throat and wound up with a ringing exhortation to every boy and girl in the audience, telling them to always hold the red, white, and blue high, both in their hands and in their hearts, and to remember that smoking was a dirty, evil habit which made you cough. The boys and girls in the audience, most of whom would be wearing peace medallions and smoking not Camels, but marijuana in another 8 years, shuffled their feet and waited for the action to begin. Less talk, more eating, someone in the back row called, and there was another burst of applause. It was heartier this time. Mayor Charbonneau handed Sylvia a stopwatch and a silver police whistle, which she would blow at the end of the 10 minutes of an all-out pie eating. Mayor Charbonneau would then step forward and hold up the hand of the winner. Are you ready? Hisner's voice rolled triumphantly through the Great Day PA and off down Main Street. The 5 pie eaters declared they were ready. Are you set? Hisner's inquired further. The eaters growled that they were indeed set. Down street, a boy set off a rattling skein of firecrackers. Mayor Charbonneau raised one pudgy hand and then dropped it. Go! 5 heads dropped into 5 pie plates. The sound was like 5 large feet stamping firmly into mud. Wet chomping noises rose on the mild night air and then were blotted out as the bettors and partisans in the crowd began to cheer on their favorites, and no more than the first pie had been demolished before most people realized that a possible upset was in the making. Lard-ass Hogan, a 7-1 underdog because of his age and inexperience, was eating like a boy possessed. His jaw... I love Stephen King. His jaws machine. Stephen King's so good. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna try and do this so laughing. Lard-ass Hogan, a 7-1 underdog because of his age and inexperience, was eating like a boy possessed. His jaws machine gunned up. His jaws machine gunned up crust. The contest rules required that only the top crust of the pie be eaten, not the bottom. And when that had disappeared, a huge sucking sound issued from between his lips. It was like the sound of an industrial vacuum cleaner going to work. Then his whole head disappeared into the pie plate. He raised it 15 seconds later to indicate he was done. His cheeks and forehead were smeared with blueberry juice, and he looked like an extra in a minstrel show. He was done before the legendary Bill Travison finished half of his first pies. Startled applause went up as the mayor examined Lardass's pie plate and pronounced it clean enough. He wiped a second pie into place before the pacemaker. Lardass had garbled a regulation-sized pie in just 42 seconds. It was a contest record. He went at the second pie even more ferociously yet, his head bobbing and smooching in the soft blueberry filling. And Bill Travis threw him a worried glance as he called for his second blueberry pie. As he told friends later, he felt he was in a real contest for the first time since 1957. When George Gamach gobbled 3 pies in 4 minutes and then fainted dead away, he had to wonder, he said, if he was up against a boy or a demon. He thought of the money he had been riding on this and redoubled his efforts. But if Travis had redoubled, Lardass had trebled. Blueberries flew from his second pie dish, staining the tablecloth around him like a Jackson Pollock painting. There were blueberries in his hair. Blueberries on his bib, blueberries standing out on his forehead as if in an agony of concentration. He had actually began to sweat blueberries into water. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie. I can't stop laughing. Wet my whistle. Okay. Began to sweat blueberries, eh? Done, he cried, lifting his head from his second pie dish before Bill Travis had even consumed the crust on his new pie. Better slow down, boy, Hisner murmured. Charbonneau himself had $10 riding on Bill Travis. You gotta pace yourself if you want to hold out. It was as if Lardass hadn't heard. He tore into his third pie with lunatic speed. Jaws moving with lightning rapidity, and then, but I must interrupt for a moment to tell you that there was an empty bottle in the medicine cabinet at Lardass Hogan's house. Earlier, that bottle had been 3/4 full of pure yellow castor oil. Perhaps the most noxious fluid that the good Lord, in his infinite wisdom, ever allowed upon or beneath the face of the earth. Lardass had emptied the bottle himself, drinking every last drop and then licking the rim, his mouth twisting, his belly gagging sourly, his brain filled with thoughts of sweet revenge. As he rapidly worked his way through the third pie, Calvin Spire, dead last as predicted, had not yet finished his first. Lardass began to deliberately torture himself with grisly fantasies. He was not only eating pies at all, he was eating cow flops. He was eating great big gobs of greasy, grimy gopher guts. He was eating diced up woodchuck intestines with blueberry sauce poured over them. Rancid blueberry sauce. He finished his third pie and called for his fourth, now 1 full pie ahead of the legendary Bill Travis. The tickled crowd The fickle crowd, sensing a new and unexpected champ in the making, began to cheer him on lustily, but Lardass had no hope or intention of winning. He could not have continued at the pace he was currently setting in if his mother's life had been the prize. And besides, winning for him was losing. Revenge was the only blue ribbon he sought. His belly groaning with castor oil, his throat opening and closing sickly. He finished his fourth pie and called his fifth the ultimate pie. Blueberries became Electra. So to speak, he dropped his head into the dish, breaking the crust, and snuffled. Blueberries up his nose. Blueberries went down his shirt. The contents of his stomach seemed to suddenly gain weight. He chewed up pastry crust and swallowed it. He inhaled blueberries. And suddenly, the moment of revenge was at hand. His stomach, loaded beyond endurance, revolted. It clenched like a strong hand, encased in a slick rubber glove. His throat opened. Lardass raised his head. He grinned at Bill Travis with blue teeth. Puke rumbled up his throat like a 6-ton Peterbilt shooting through a tunnel. Oh my God. It roared out of his mouth in huge blue and yellow glurt, warm and gaily streaming. It covered Bill Travis, who only had time to utter one pronounced syllable. God. Was what it sounded like. Women in the audience screamed. Calvin Spear, who had watched his unannounced event with a numb and surprised expression on his face, leaned conversationally over the table as if to explain to the gaping audience just what was happening, and puked on the head of Margaret Charbonneau, the mayor's wife. She screamed and backed away, pawing futilely at her hair, which was now covered with a mixture of crushed berries, baked beans, and partially digested frankfurters. The latter two had been Cal Spire's dinner. She turned to her good friend Maria Lavin and threw up on the front of Maria's buckskin jacket. In rapid succession, like a replay of the firecrackers, Bill Travis blew a great and seemingly supercharged jet of vomit out over the first 2 rows of spectators. His stunned face proclaiming to one and all, "Man, I just can't believe I'm doing this." Chuck Day, who had received a generous portion of Bill Travis's surprise gift, threw up on his hush puppies and then blinked to them wonderingly, knowing full well that the stuff would never come off swayed. John Wiggins, principal of Greta Elementary, opened his blue-lined mouth and said reprovingly, "Really? This has yerk!" As befitted a man of his breeding and position, he did it in his own pie plate. Hisner's Charbonneau, who found himself suddenly presiding over what must seem much like a stomach flu hospital ward than a pie eating contest, opened his mouth to call the whole thing off and upchucked all over the microphone. "Jesus, save us!" moaned Sylvia Dodge, and then her outraged supper, fried clams, coleslaw, butter, and sugar corn, 2 ears worth, and a generous helping of Muriel Harrington's Bosco chocolate cake, bolted out the emergency exit and landed with a large wet splash on the back of the Mayor Roberts Hall suit coat. Lardass Hogan, now at the absolute apogee of his young life, beamed happily out over the audience. Puke was everywhere. People staggered around in drunken circles, holding their throats and making wheat crawling noises. Somebody's pecking geese ran past the stage, yapping crazily, and a man wearing jeans and a Western style silk shirt threw up on it, nearly drowning it. Mrs. Brockway, the Methodist minister's wife, made a long, basso belching noise, which was followed by a gusher of degenerated roast beef and mashed potatoes and apple cobbler. The cobbler looked as if it might have been good when it was first wiped down. Barry Malling, who had come to see his pet mechanic walk away with all the marbles again, decided to get to the righteous fuck out of this madhouse. He got about 15 yards before tripping over a kid's little red wagon and realizing he had landed in a puddle of warm bile. Oh. Jerry tossed his cookies in his own lap and told folks later he only thanked Providence he had been wearing his coveralls. And Miss Norman, who taught Latin and English fundamentals at the Gretna Consolidated High School, vomited into her own purse in an agony of propriety. Lard Ass Hogan watched it all, his large face calm and beaming, his stomach suddenly sweet and steady with a warm balm it might never know again. That balm was a feeling of utter and complete satisfaction. He stood up, took the slightly tacky microphone from the trembling hand of Mayor Charbonneau and said, "I declare this contest a draw." Then he puts some mic down, walks off the back of the platform, and goes straight home. His mother's there on account of she couldn't get a babysitter for Lard Ass's little sister, who was only 2. And as soon as he comes in, all covered with puke and pie drool, still wearing his bibs, she says, "Davy, did you win?" But he doesn't say a fucking word, just goes upstairs to his room, locks the door, and lays down on his bed. We're gonna stop there. Alright. Misfits, underdogs, and other little lunatics. We're gonna come back and continue. Oh, this is such a good story. I hope you're enjoying it, and I love you. Bye.